and welcome to Fats on Film. I am your host, Hannah Ogilvie, and this is the podcast where we talk about all things fat and body representation in film and TV and wider media. And today I am joined by Ygraine Hackett-Cantabrana, who is a contributor to Ghouls magazine, Moving Pictures Film Club, and host of What is Screen podcast. Hello, Ygraine!
Hi!
Hey!
Hey!
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I am not bad, thank you. I'm loving these longer days.
Mm.
The fact that it's still sunny outside is really filling my soul.
I don't know. I'm a dark little nocturnal creature, so I'm
Are
like,
you?
I like it when it's dark.
Oh my God, we
Yeah.
are complete opposites. I'm a sun baby. I need the sun. I just
No,
came back from a weekend in Copenhagen. Have you been?
I have. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
have.
what did you think?
It was the depths of winter, and my son was like 4 months old, so
Oh
we
wow.
probably should have waited till he was a bit older. But sure, look, listen.
Oh, well done you though. You like that is effort that you put into that.
I was like, we will not stop traveling just because of this child.
No, and
Um,
I applaud you for that. The smallest hiccup, and I'm like, do I really want to do this? I just want to go back home and chill. No, we loved it, and we were like, oh, can we move? What do we move? And we were watching all these YouTube videos when we got home, and one of the things they said was like the winters are like long and dark.
mm.
And I don't know if I can't do worse than here. So I think we might have to not do that. Unless, of course, I create some kind of bougie lifestyle where I could do like summers in Copenhagen and winters in like California or something. But that is a long way off. So,
Yeah. No, I need my winter. I'm a very winter person. I hate the sun. I get really
oh my
angry in the sun. Like
God.
you probably like whenever I'm in London during the summer, I'm always quite angry because even though I love London, it's so
Mhm.
hot in the city.
No,
Like just yeah.
yeah, it's so hot there. No, that's fair. I think a lot of people get angry when it's that hot in London. It's
Yeah.
too much. It's too ugh and sticky and gross. Ugh. Anyway, those are our thoughts on the seasons, if in case anyone was interested. But we are here to talk about Piggy. This is a 2002 Spanish horror, so it's a Cerdita, yeah, Cerdita in Spanish. Hello, it's Hannah from editing. Straight away, I'm having to check myself. So I said this is a 2002 film. It's actually a 2022 film, just to avoid any confusion. I'm sorry about that. Slip of the tongue. All right, bye. It's based on a 2019 short film of the same name, written and directed by Carlota Pereda. I hope I'm saying that name correctly. Cast led by I want to say it's Laura Galán, but it could be Laura Galán. Richard Holmes, Carmen Mackey. World premiered at Sundance last year and had its UK premiere at Fright Fest in August of last year. And it made, I mean, I want to say, I always say this, like how much it made at the box office. So it made $409,000, but with these festival films, you really can't gauge a film's
Mm.
success on its box office because it's not going down the same route as your blockbusters.
Mhm.
So take that with a pinch of salt. So I'm going to hand over to you, Grain. Could you please give us a synopsis of Piggy?
So it centers around Sara, who is bullied by her peers, and especially Claudia, who used to be like her old best friend. And one day they attack her in the local outdoor swimming pool, and it is there from these events that she discovers there is a serial killer in town and is killing her bullies or has kidnapped her bullies and possibly has killed them. And so it kind of centers around Sara and her experience as a fat young woman, and how she's kind of grappling with these moral codes that are kind of being thrown at her from this weird experience she finds herself in.
I think this film is grappling with a load of different things because I think this is a good film about a lot of grey.
Mm-hmm.
There's no clear like good or bad, and I just want to know initially, is this the first time you'd seen it was for this podcast, or had you seen it previously?
So this was the first time I saw it when I was watching it
Right.
for this podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but especially after Fright Fest, there was such a buzz about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
There really was.
especially, I don't know whether you want to touch on this, but especially reactions
Mm-hmm.
at Fright Fest.
Yes.
Um, And so because of the themes in it, I was really interested.
Hmm.
Um, and so yeah, it definitely been on my watch list since Fright Fest of last year.
Hmm.
So this was the first time I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I was the exact same. I think I knew of it. I think I've always, as soon as I hear like a good Spanish horror is coming out, my ears go, oh, is there? Let me tune into that. And I obviously heard what happened at Fright Fest. Okay, for those who don't know, there was a shitty Q&A that happened at Fright Fest to do with this film. I wasn't there. I've heard it probably second, third, fourth hand by this point, but I do remember my Twitter feed being about this Q&A, and I just some I guess tone deaf and fat phobic questions, which
Yeah.
I mean, did you not see the film? Like, come
Right?
on.
I
Uh,
mean, talk about just being like over your head. Like,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm like, oh Lord, like there's no help. If you've walked out of that, since then I was like, oh well, I really want to see this film and see what's going on about it. I actually was really lucky. There's a chain of cinemas. I don't know if you've got them over in Ireland, but there's called the Light Cinemas, and I know there's definitely one in Sheffield, and I know there's one in Manchester, Stockport area, but I'm not sure where there are other ones. But these are just, show your blockbusters, but they can also show like these independent films. And they showed Piggy one night, and I went to go see it, and I was very pleased to see that it was a full cinema
mm,
to go see this film. And I often go to the cinema on my own. It's like my way of self-care and self-love is to go to the cinema and see whatever I want.
mm,
And I was sat there and I was moved to tears with this film. It really hit me in a way I guess I kind of was expecting, but I
mm,
think there are some parts of it which are just so nuanced. And I think Laura Galán's performance is just tremendous in this. She does this thing. I don't know if you picked up on it, where she like, when you want to cry and scream at the same time,
yeah.
and you get that tightness in your
Yeah.
throat. Oh my God, she sells the shit out of that.
Yeah.
She does it. I can remember two times she does it in the film, which is at the pool when she shouts at her mum, and again, when I think it's when she shouts at her mum again in the house. And I was like, oh, how I don't know. She must have had a sore throat afterwards. I feel like I've got a sore throat just talking about it. And I just think that nuance was so well portrayed. And so, what were your initial thoughts watching Piggy? Like, how did it resonate with you as a whole?
For me, I I liked this moral ambiguity that
Mm,
it kind of portrayed, which I'm sure we'll get into. I can be quite a black and white person at times. It's just how I
mm,
receive things. But this, it really had me questioning, like, are my morals right? Like,
mm, mm-hmm.
um, and another thing that really got me was this mother-daughter relationship, which is something
Yes.
I'm really interested in, coming from um, quite an abusive, toxic mother myself. And so to see this kind of reflection, especially when, Sara's mother is fat as well, and we
Mm-hmm.
kind of see this not so much like outwardly self-loathing, but there's definitely self-loathing there for her to turn around and rather than support her daughter who she
Mm-hmm.
knows is being bullied goes, well, here's some salad, like you're
Oh,
gonna lose weight.
oh yeah.
And like
Oh yeah.
the trigger that put on me
Mm-hmm.
of like my own mother being quite abusive when it came to my weight, it was
Mm,
just such a trigger. And the way you were talking about Sarah's reaction, like the lump in her throat, for me, it was even just like the looks on her face that she'd give her mother that when you knew that she wanted to say something
mm-hmm.
and she couldn't, but then those like lump in the throat moments were where she just exploded.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who has that parental figure or had that parental figure, like I could just completely like relate to that and having those moments
Yeah.
where you're like, I am going to kill you if you do
Mm-hmm.
not shut up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it really spoke to me on a lot of levels.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to go into that in a much more detail as we go on. But I guess the first thing we should talk about is Sara, played
Mhm.
by Laura Galán. What do you think of her? 'Cause we talk about this grey morality, and she is who we're following. We like
Mm.
as an audience, you're meant to be 100% on her side. Do you think the film does a good job of making you be on her side?
Absolutely, yeah. I kind of feel like she is representative of us
Mm-hmm.
because she goes through that moral gray area as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, do you do spoilers? You want to do
Oh yeah, oh
spoilers?
yeah. You know what?
Okay,
Like,
good, good.
100%. spoilers for Piggy throughout, because you
Okay.
have to for
Yeah.
this. Because again, I don't know if you knew what you were expecting when you walked into this film, but I wasn't. And
Yeah.
so, like 10 minutes in, this became a film I was not expecting.
Yeah.
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 So go on, spoil away.
So when we learn that this killer is basically killing people and kidnapping her bullies because he's kind of either he's fallen in love with her or he kind of sees himself in her
Mm.
because he as well is fat. And when Sara sees her ex-friend Claudia being kidnapped, she doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
She's just like, bye, bitch.
Mm-hmm.
And even when she's showering later, she just goes, fuck them, like, fuck them.
Mm-hmm.
But she grapples with her own morality and the guilt she's carrying because of that, because
Mm-hmm.
everyone's like, all these girls have gone missing, these people are murdered, what do I do? And she's the one that's carrying literally that weight on her shoulders.
Yes. Yes.
Um, and so she has to decide whether she is gonna, allow this person to carry on killing and
Mm-hmm.
torturing and kidnapping, or whether she is gonna stand up and do the right thing in inverted commas. And I feel like that's the same journey that we go on as the audience. Because there was times I was like, just fuck them, they deserve it. Like they're terrible people, they fucking deserve it. But at the
I
same time, you're
yeah.
like, I don't condone this man kidnapping and torturing women. Like,
Honestly, I that is 100% the issue, right? I wrote down in my notes, when I watched it earlier. Where is it? I said I can't with these cunts. I cannot stand the mean girls.
yeah,
And oh God, some of the things they say to poor Sara, just, I mean, as a fat kid growing up,
yeah,
I'm like, oh God, like it really was reliving some
yeah,
nasty things, right? And so it's interesting. So Sara as a character, so she's the eldest daughter of this family who own a butcher shop. It's somewhere in Spain, isn't it?
yeah,
Like inland Spain, and she clearly is an outsider. She's clearly not got any friends anymore, and you touched on that. So we understand really quickly that Clow, who is now part of this Mean Girls group, is a former best friend because they have these BFF bracelets, and I think it's really interesting that Clow still wears hers.
mm,
And I'm like, oh, I mean, Clow again is quite an interesting character. I hate her, but she's interesting. And she's part of this like mean girl group. And they call the family the three little piggies, and they take pictures of them and put them on Instagram or whatever social media equivalent. And Sarah just wants to sit and study. She wants to keep herself to herself. She eats her hair out of anxiety, and she gives a few indications that she emotionally eats, which I can understand.
mm,
Like, if food is your only constant, you're going to rely on it. She
yeah,
can't rely on her family. She can't rely on her friends. She can rely on food. Makes perfect sense to me.
mm,
And then, yeah, so she then goes to the local pool, like you mentioned, to importantly during siesta time, so she doesn't
mm,
have to deal with anyone looking at her. And she gets there, and this random man, and the film calls the man, well, he's in the credits as desconocido, which is the unknown.
mm,
So we don't know much about him apart from what you say. He is fat, and that's really important to this plot. And the nasty girls are horrible to her. They try and drown her, don't they? And Clive films it, and I'm like, oh, you're just such a nasty little girl. But then, yeah, the film switches, and we see that this unknown man has defended Sara to a certain point, right? And has taken these girls. I don't think Sara realizes at that point that that's what he's
mm,
doing. I think that becomes clearer later on, but we know, as we're kind of talking about it now, he's doing it to defend her. And then she goes back to, working in the shop, and everyone, like, even like when she goes into the local shop and she gets like a biscuit, someone comments on it
yeah,
to say, like, on your head be it. Like, she is just judged by everyone, her
yeah,
family, friends, just random villagers,
mm,
like random abuelas, old women in the street are judging her.
yeah,
And you're just like, I don't blame her for, like, maybe not coming forward
yeah,
with this information. And I think she oh yeah, and then there's that horrible moment with those nasty boys in the car.
That was really horrible for me. Like that really upset me.
Yeah. I
Mm,
think being fat is this interest, especially a fat woman, I should
mm,
say. It's a really interesting dynamic because on one hand, you're this woman who some people believe should be inherently sexualized and sexual and should be to a certain population's gratification.
mhm,
But then you're fat, so that means you're not sexually attractive. It means that you're less than, you're morally bad. So these boys in this car really showcase that, where they're calling her really horrible names, but at the same time grabbing at her, trying to
mm,
take off her bikini, lifting her up, trying to like take control of her body. And I think in a way that really showcases this weird, again, back to gray area,
mm.
that a fat woman, especially a fat young girl, because I don't know if it ever says explicitly how old she is, but I would have thought she's
Yeah.
about 16-ish,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think, these are older boys grabbing at her, sexualizing her, while also like calling her horrible names. Like it's interesting. When I was reading it, the subtitles, one boy says gross, while the
Mm,
other one says cute little piggy.
yeah.
And it's just such a like juxtaposition of, I guess like cute little piggy is nasty, but it using the word cute and little is like
Mm,
could be construed as like nicer, and then
mm,
it's instantly like followed up by the gross. It's just this constant like hypocritical place she's coming from. And we see as well Sara really lusts after just not even after the boy of the mean girl group, but I think it's more like she just lusts after that kind of attention
mm.
and that
Yeah.
inclusion. And I wondered, like, how did you feel about Sara how Sara's body is portrayed in this film? Because Carlotta, the director, how does she, how do you feel like she shows her body? Because I don't think she shies away at all.
No, I actually love that about this film that they don't put her in like massive, like a line kind of flowing, like
Oh my god, yeah.
typically kind of clothes that you'd expect to see on a fat body in a film. They put her in a bikini, shorts, vest tops, and it's proudly displaying like this is a body, not even proudly because that's like, but just being like this is a body that exists, that needs to wear a bikini to swim, needs to wear shorts in the hot weather. Like it's not, it shouldn't be a statement, but it is,
Mm-hmm.
because of obviously the world we live in. But like this is literally just a body that is existing in its environment.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she then juxtaposes that against other people's reactions of her,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, the group of boys,
Mm.
um and it's almost like she's given a sort of control by the filmmaker of this body, but then she's also portraying how these boys not only want to take away her control
Mm-hmm.
of her body, but also of her like mentality and her emotional state by basically sexually assaulting her.
Yeah.
Um, and it just feels like it's all about control. Like they're trying
Mm-hmm.
to, yeah, it's basically they're trying to take away this control from Sara over her own body, which I guess society does day in, day out for fat bodies,
Mm-hmm.
is that they're saying, fat bodies shouldn't be in control of their own body.
Mm. Absolutely. She is judged purely for existing.
Mm,
And I 100% agree with your statement. The fact that she is dressing appropriate for the weather she's in,
mm,
I was like, oh my God, yes, you wear shorts.
yeah.
Yes, you wear vest tops. Get your arms out. You
Mm,
will be hot. And then, the fact that they choose to put her in a bikini
mm,
at the pool scene, oh my God, like, as much as it leads to like a really nasty scene, I like I fucking loved it. I
yeah.
mean, I wish I could go back to like 16-year-old me and be like, oh yeah, you're allowed to wear a bikini.
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
Because I was always told, no, no, hide that belly.
Yeah.
I remember, sorry, I'm going personal now, but I remember like, so I grew up in Spain, so we did a lot of beach parties, very privileged, I know. And I remember I would always wear a swimming costume or a tankini.
Mm.
So always covering my belly. And 15, 16 years old, I would have had terrible posture. And we were
Yeah.
sat on the beach, and I must have just been like, hunched over like this. There was a group of us, and I was always the biggest one in the
Mm.
group, always, always. And I remember this girl just going, "You should sit with your back straight. It will make you look thinner." I was just like, oh God's sake.
Yeah.
Like as if that would help in any way. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
Like going from this to this, is it going to shed pounds? But I was, yeah, 15 or 16 years old, and it hurt me so much.
Yeah.
And I think, like, because I was around in that environment, I would never have worn anything that would have shown my bare skin in
Yeah.
that way. And so seeing Sara wear a bikini, and one of the girls makes a comment about how, like, her body's swallowing up the material or something like that. I'm like, oh, she's just wearing an appropriate outfit
Yeah.
to go swimming. And I also love how, even though she plans the day around the pool, so she's going to go specifically when she knows no one's going to be there,
Mm.
she's still going to give herself the enjoyment of being in the pool
Yeah.
and getting that respite from the heat. And I really appreciate that, because even she doesn't even tell her mum she's going. We found
Yeah.
out later she sneaks out to go do this. And I guess I wonder, like, what do you think? We know that her mum not necessarily disapproves of the pool, but do you think her mum would have a comment about what she's wearing at the pool?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think I think growing up with with a narcissistic toxic mother, I know exactly, like, if I put a short skirt on, my mother would be like, take that off, that looks disgusting on you.
Mm.
And you know what? As horrible as that is, we can chalk it down to them experiencing fat phobia,
Oh
and
yeah.
also this diet culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think that generation were of the generation where it was like the cabbage soup diet and,
Uh-huh.
like all this
Yes.
kind of crap. So that was embedded in them. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I definitely think because her mother is of a certain generation, she would turn around and be like, where are you going looking like that? Like, cover
Mm-hmm.
up, put on this like skirt swimsuit, or like a caftan or something.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and I think, yeah, it's definitely, I mean, fat phobia and body kind of troubles and this kind of diet culture has really ingrained itself into
Mm-hmm.
where it is almost an intergenerational trauma that
Mm-hmm.
is being kind of linearly passed on from mother to daughter, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously what you grow up with, you're going to reflect back. And so, yeah, I definitely think her mother would have been disapproving about what she
Yeah.
was wearing. She would have humiliated her,
Mm-hmm.
embarrassed her, made her feel even worse,
Mm-hmm.
which is terrible because that's not what a mother should be doing for their children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think her mom, I actually, again, in my notes, I put she's a product of her time,
Mm.
right? And this idea. So what last episode I did was on hairspray with Sarah Miles, also contributor to Ghouls magazine. And I spoke in that one about how the people who are enforcing Tracy, I guess, like, Tracy's negative body
Yeah.
type and like bringing her down, are the women in the film.
Mm.
And again, like, it really is. I mean, I'm not in a place to talk about men's relationship with food or body,
Mm-hmm.
because obviously that is absolutely a thing, and I would love to have a guest talk about that with me. So if anyone's listening, hit me up. But what I can talk about, because we've got experience on it, is from a woman's perspective, and definitely growing up in a house where you're watched like a hawk.
Mm.
Of what you're eating, even though you don't really have much control over what you're eating, because you're just eating what your parents are giving you. I was compared a lot to my younger sibling, who
Mm.
was a lot thinner than I was. And it was always this kind of like, well, why is she thin and you're not thin and all that? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand how bodies work and genetics work. I'm 11. And I think when Sarah has that big break at the pool, when her mum is like trying to get her to tell her, the police, the Guardia Civil, oh, she was at the pool, she comes to the pool,
Mm.
she doesn't think I know, she knows something. And then finally Sarah breaks and she screams, they call me Piggy and you do nothing.
Mm.
And Sarah's mum is shocked at this outburst, probably one of the first outbursts Sarah's ever had in her life. So there's, what,
Yeah.
15, 16 years of this has been banging, and the pressure of the day, because this is over one day,
Mm.
everything happens, has really got to her. She's finally broke. I think Sarah's mum whisks her away, and she says, "Oh, you think I do nothing? Well, I'll show you,"
Yeah.
type thing. And her solution is to start feeding Sarah salads.
Mm.
And that was triggering.
Mm.
I was like, oh no, not the rabbit food. And again, it's like you say, it's that idea of like, that was that, specifically that generation. And we're still feeling it in our generation. But I do think we're growing out of it. We're a lot more mindful of it now. But like you say, of the Atkins diet,
Yeah.
we guess we have intermittent fasting now in keto, but back
Mm.
then it was very much like the beetroot diet, when not you eat like 12 beetroots a day, and
Yeah.
it
Or
was
like the slim fast shakes. That was a big thing in the
oh
90s.
god, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've done it all. I've done it all. What's interesting about the family, Claudia's mother comes in and asking Sarah for anything. Do you know where
Mm.
Cloud is? I know you don't speak anymore, but you might know something. I guess she's probably going around all the children in the village trying to figure out whether her daughter is. Sarah's mom kicks her out, and then she says to Sarah's dad, "You just sat there. You didn't defend your daughter."
Mm.
And I was like, that is called projection, Sarah's mom, because you're not defending Sarah. And that is actually really like a massive part of the film, right? It's like no one defends Sarah. No
Yeah.
one. And I even like her dad, but he's just so placid and passive that
Yeah.
he's not really defending his daughter either. And the only one who does defend her is the murderer. He's the only one.
Yeah.
I mean, the first bit of kindness that she gets, or that we see her get, is the towel. So when
Mm.
she first sees that like Clow and the other girls have been taken in this van by this random man, she pees herself because she's terrified. And he drops her a towel so she can cover herself up. I guess like the main point is like he's fat, so he can maybe like relate to her in some way, and that's why he like takes pity on her, right? He gives her a
Mm.
towel to help herself cover up. But what, like, the chemistry between Sara and the man, like what are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's too much? Did you want it to go further?
No, for me, it kind of reflected how, because Sarah has no support system at home, because she's bullied by everyone basically that she comes into contact with in her village, in her family house. She
Mm-hmm.
has zero support structure. She's completely on her own. She's isolated. For me, Piggy was a good portrayal of how easy it is for someone who comes from that to fall into abusive relationships,
Yes.
toxic situations, dangerous situations, and come to rely on things that, although initially they look good for us, they're actually possibly the worst thing you could go, you could possibly get involved with. And so when she was having this kind of weird connection with this guy, and this kind of not a relationship, but kind of chemistry almost,
Mm-hmm.
I could really see it as like the beginning of, obviously not to the same extent, because I'm sure not everyone falls in love with mass murderers or whatever, but it really represented like how easy it is to go from one abusive relationship with your family to another abusive relationship in a romantic sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, no, girl, get out of there as fast as you can.
Oh my God. I mean, you're so right. And it is this idea, because I guess if you've been brought up in a toxic environment, your idea of normal is very warped.
Mm.
So you're right. Like, then she's gone from like this no support structure to then having, yes, a support structure in this murdering man is such a red flag.
I mean, the biggest red flag.
I
If
mean,
there ever was a big
I
red
know,
flag,
I
that's
know.
it.
I know, but then I also like really, really appreciated like almost like her desperation
Yeah.
for it. Because again, I can't help but relate to like this idea of, because there's a moment where I guess for her it dawns on her how he's doing this for her when she goes to get her phone in amongst this, I don't know, derelict site, right? And they have this weird like emotional tryst where he's like really breathing quite heavily like at her.
Oh, that creeped me out. I'm like, stop breathing at me, man.
Breathing at her. And I was like, yeah, okay, cool. And then she scarpers off, gets back to her house, and she has a wank. And again, like it's specifically about, she's wanking to the porn, but then we
Mm.
hear him say Sara like under his breath at her as she's reminiscing. And I'm like, okay, like you do you, girl, but like this can't be a thing. We can't go into this. But at the same time, I was like, I get it. Because if
Yeah.
she is so starved for there's a pun there, starved for like attention and like that human connection. And I bet, like, I mean, I again, fancied a lot of boys at school and knew they would never look at me
Mm.
because I was bigger. And I think I really, used to have like, full blown like daydreams in my head where I'd be like, oh, but this one, he'll be, happy to take the, I don't know, like criticism for like fancying a girl who looks like me, and
Mm.
I would be worth it. All that kind of like schmaltzy stuff I used to just fantasize about.
Mm.
And I think that's what Sara is doing here. She's like, oh, this guy is willing to risk it all, literally by murdering teenage girls. They're willing to risk it all because he thinks she's worth it. And
Yeah.
as much as I never went that extreme with my daydreams, I
I don't know.
well, actually, who knows? I can't remember. It's 15 years ago. Maybe that's what I was into. But yeah, I think that really struck me as
Mm.
true, like as true. Like I felt that was such a true thing that I think any girl or young woman who's not only fat but maybe doesn't even fit the beauty standard, whatever that might be, right? And I love that scene as
Yeah.
much as it's creepy and weird. I'm like, I love it.
Mm.
I think there is an argument. I'm going to go down like potential film theory, that
Mhm.
the man doesn't exist. Kind of like
High tension.
yes. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah, I got exactly the same vibe from it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought that's what it was going to be. Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. So I
Yeah.
didn't catch it on my first watch, but on the second watch, I was like, oh, like because he is almost like he is if she gave into every desire,
Yeah.
right? And like it's such an extreme point of view. I was like, oh, hold on, are we going to have like a switchblade romance type of thing?
Mm.
Did you have any like further thoughts on that?
It could be, couldn't it? Like it has a certain level of ambiguity. I think until we reach the point towards the end where she comes across the two bullies, Rocky and Claudia,
Yeah.
um, and they're like, he's coming back, get us down, get
Mm,
us down. So I don't think that was the intention. However, I definitely think it can be read as the unknown guy is definitely a reflection of all her inner desires and how she would
mhm,
like to manifest her anger and her
mhm,
desperation and everything else. But yeah, I don't think that was the intention of the
mhm,
filmmakers.
mhm.
Um, yeah, but I definitely gave off those strong vibes.
Yeah, even like the fact that it's a van, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, like that literally happens in high tension. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it isn't that twist,
Yeah.
but I guess it's such a moral tale that this
Mm.
person has to represent, like you say, all of that anger and everything she's ever wanted to
Mm.
express. The fact that he like strikes her mum.
Yeah.
I can imagine she really wanted to do the same. And then, interestingly, actually, on that point, in that scene, he's stopping the mum from striking her.
Mm.
And you mentioned something really interesting, which is like you think there's a bit of or a lot of self-loathing
Mm.
loathing happening there with the mum. The way she talks to Sara, I just found really upsetting.
Mm,
almost like patronizing, condescending, but still feeling some kind of responsibility. So, like behind closed doors, she's an arsehole, for lack of a
yeah.
better term. But then when she's in the village or when they go to the police and they interrogate Sara a bit,
Mm,
she's she's trying to advocate for her child. And she says something interesting, which is like, I may be dumb, but I know we need a lawyer present during this. And
mm,
I was like, oh, that's like a real bit of self-reflection. Like you don't think you're intelligent enough to get out of this situation and appropriately advocate for your daughter. Really not impressed by the police. And to be fair, I think the police are shit. Like they're not good. Like I'm like, you're interrogating this 16-year-old child. This is not smart. um but yeah, I think like she's really and I think this is what with a lot of parents when they have fat children especially is how it reflects on them as
mm,
parents. And I think Sarah's mum is so hyper aware of how does Sarah represent her as a mother. And I think when she's indoors, she's like letting her have it. Like looking for some notes, but like, she says something like, "Why don't you tell me anything?" It's because
mm,
like you're the most closed off woman. Anything she would have to say, you'd bite her head off for it anyway. So why would she
yeah.
come forth with anything? She's like, "Oh, I don't defend you." Well, here's me defending you. And she goes, the town, the people in this town are full of spite, but you are fat, so you need to lose weight. So
Yeah.
it's this like, oh, you agree that the people are being horrible, but you kind of agree of why they're being horrible. Like that, no, you can't have it both ways.
Yeah. I find her quite performative. That, like you said, behind
Yes.
closed doors, she's horrible to Sarah. But
Mm-hmm.
while she's out in public, she's trying to be like, the fierce mama bear and, try and kind of perform in front of everybody. Like, look at what a great mother I am by beating the crap out of this other woman. Um,
Yes.
and it's all very performative. And even when she says to the police officers, I know we need a lawyer here, whatever, the other police officer goes, oh my God, Hollywood films, God's
Mm-hmm.
sake. And it's almost like she's acting like she's seen it on television. So this is what she needs to say. And yeah, I mean, I just find her very victim blamey.
Mm-hmm.
And, instead of helping your daughter the right way, you're going to force her to conform to what society thinks she should be rather
Mm-hmm.
than trying to help her. You're
Mm-hmm.
helping society view her easier in quotation marks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and that grosses me out.
No, totally. But I actually, you touched on something there, which I think like all fat phobia is victim blaming
Mm,
because it comes from this place of it's a choice.
yeah.
It's a choice to be fat. It's a choice to eat that. It's a choice to not go to the gym. And I've said it on this podcast and I'll say it 100 times more. Being fat is because of a realm of different reasons. It's not, I get for years, and I'm like, decades, we have been told it's because we're eating too much of this and we're eating too much of that, or it's calories in, calories out. Like, there is so much research out there that shows that that is not the case. For
Mm,
everybody is different, and how we metabolize different foods is so different. So, like, what might be completely fine for me to eat, and I metabolize in a quote unquote normal way, you might really struggle to metabolize that because you might have an intolerance, and that might cause XYZ. We're all different, and I think the idea of fat phobia or fat shaming comes from this place of like, but you caused this.
mm,
So for example, the bullies, they could argue, well, if she didn't eat those, they looked gross, these little cakes that she kept eating. I was like, oh, Sarah, I mean, you do you, but that's not for me. They look just really like, I don't know, like fake, I guess. I mean, I know they're
yeah.
cakes, but you know what I mean, a little bit um yeah, they they could be like, well, if she stopped eating them cakes, then we wouldn't have to bully her, like almost like. And same with the mum. Well, if she didn't look the way she did, then I wouldn't have to keep defending her. And it's this constant blame at Sarah. And again, as someone who has been fat all their lives, I get that idea that it's completely my fault. And if
Yeah.
I try and advocate for myself in any way, then I'm almost opening that door to criticism. And that criticism will be the most fat phobic shit you'll hear.
Mm.
And I just think it's so interesting why I'm optimistic that things might change because, this way of thinking is becoming a lot more mainstream than it has been years previous. But I can't think of any other, maybe I'm so wrong because I'm warped to my own own little world, but I can't think of any other characteristic, for lack of a better term, where like they go, it's your fault that we're treating you this way. Uh,
I definitely go for like, obviously it's not as, but definitely when it comes to like transphobia,
okay.
homophobia, like I definitely think that it's somewhat in the same vein.
No,
Um,
that's a really good point because I'm coming from a really privileged place where I'm
mm,
going, well, everyone knows that's not a choice. But no, you're
yeah.
right. People do think it's choices. So yes,
Yeah.
completely right. Yes. But it's very
Um,
similar, right?
yeah. And I definitely, for me personally, it's very alien that
Mm.
people can be fat phobic and transphobic and homophobic to something that doesn't affect them.
Yes.
Even if someone was fat because they ate a shitload of food or didn't go to the gym, so what?
I know.
Like, how does that affect any other person?
Yeah.
Like someone being trans or having a different gender or sexuality to me doesn't affect who I am.
Hmm.
So why should, like, the same way, why should someone else's size affect me? It
Hmm.
doesn't. And
Hmm.
so I cannot understand, I cannot fathom how people become so vitriolic towards personalities or characteristics of people
Hmm.
that have nothing to do with them.
Hmm.
It's so, and I really think that this film is really good at highlighting that. Like, why does
Hmm.
Sarah's size bother these people so much?
So much. I mentioned this at the hairspray episode, especially I can't speak for everything you've just said, so for the transphobia, the
Mm,
homophobia, or any other kind of phobia. But I think for fat phobia, it's because people are really insecure,
mm,
and I think there is a a comfort in identifying that, oh, well, at least I fit the beauty standard of being a size 8, size 10,
mm.
right? So there's comfort in that, but it's fragile.
Yeah,
And so if you start to see someone who doesn't fit that beauty standard, doesn't fit the BMI scale, which is trash and we hate it, but it's,
yeah,
it's what we use, doesn't adhere to it, is fine if their class is obese on the BMI scale. Spent your life believing that, and all of a sudden you're confronted with people who don't also believe that same thing. You think it's a judgment on yourself, so you defend it tooth and nail. And I
mm,
think that with the transphobia argument, I think people are really fragile in who they are as people, that one of the labels they can put on themselves is woman, for example.
mm.
And all of a sudden, if you start opening that label up so anyone can call themselves a woman, it somehow takes it away from you that you're also a woman. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, like it doesn't
That's
work
not
that
how it
way.
works.
No,
It's not a pie. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like we can all be called it. Like that's cool. I've had that question thrown at me so many times. I'm like, but I'm really confident in my own womanhood.
yeah.
I am not threatened if someone else who has nothing to do with me also calls themselves a woman. So yeah, so I think fat phobia is just bizarre. I mean, I guess phobias of every type is just bizarre. But. Right. There's a point in the film where I was like, are they gonna blame are they going to blame Sara for all this? And they're kind of leading up to it, right? So the police are really, well, I say the police, that one young police officer has got his eye on her. Pedro, the
Mm,
boyfriend with the cast in his arm, he starts depending on Sara. And I was like, oh God, they're not going to go down the route of like, it's all Sara to blame, and they're going to blame bullying for it.
mm.
And I was like, what would your thoughts have been if they were like, oh, she just snapped and she just killed them all because they bullied her? Would that not have been satisfying for you?
I definitely think even if they had gone that route, it would have been very in line with the film, with this whole victim blaming thing.
Yeah.
That, Sarah is a victim in this, even if the guy is doing it because of her, she is
Mm.
still a victim. She's
Hmm.
still being manipulated by him. She has still been the victim of an assault. And, people trying to kill her, basically. So it definitely would have been in line with the whole victim blaming thing, but I'm glad they didn't, and I'm glad they gave her a heroic arc.
Yes.
But I'm so happy of the it wasn't like she's the hero and now, everything's fine and we're all gonna get on like the Brady Bunch. I really loved the ending where fucking Roki calls her Piggy while she is saving her,
Oh,
calls her Piggy,
no.
and Sara pulls up the shotgun and you think, well, she shot her. And I was just
Mm.
like, oh, well, she deserved it. She fucking deserved it. But
Mm-hmm.
it turns out that no, she just shot the rope and
Mm-hmm.
allowed the two girls. But the fact that they don't all walk off into the sunset or, wait for the police, she walks off and she's
Mm-hmm.
like, you can fucking go your own way now. You can save yourselves. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going this way and I'm going to ride off into the sunset on the back of your boyfriend's moped. Um,
Yes.
and I really like that it wasn't so much a performative heroic ending. It was her own heroic ending where she could settle her morality and she can say to herself, I've done the right thing, but I'm going to continue doing the right thing for me from now on.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I love the ending.
Yeah.
Um, to a certain point, I do question how cathartic it truly is in the end. I find a lot of the film cathartic, but that the way Clow is screaming at
Yeah.
Sara during that first scene, I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do something I'm gonna regret here.
Yeah. I mean, if I was Sara, I definitely would have walked out at that point and been like,
Oh,
drop the,
you're on your
drop the
own.
mic, walk off. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just like, oh, shut the fuck up. And then she said something like, you didn't tell anyone, you didn't tell anyone. I was like, yeah, but you almost killed her. Like
Yeah.
you literally filmed. Is it Massey? The other one who's already dead. So the three main girls is Massey,
Yeah.
Rossi, and Clow. And so Clow and Rossi still alive by the end. And in a slaughterhouse, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, we're in the
Yeah.
slaughterhouse that's strung up like pigs. I was like, I see you imagery, I get it. And I was like, the screaming, she ungags them to begin with, and Clive says, it's untie me, screaming, you didn't tell anyone, where are the police, you didn't tell anyone.
Yeah.
And Sara goes, I can't do anything right. And I was like, Sara, no, this is so much for you to have to deal with right now. You're okay. I just want to hold her and be like, it's okay. Like it would have been anyone would have struggled with that.
Mm.
And as she's getting them down, the man comes back, and it's interesting because Clow is still going, Sara, help, Sara, help. I think she even calls Sara an idiot at some point, and I
Yeah.
was like, mm. But Rossi tells Sara to run. It's like, run, Sara, run. And she goes running, and that's when she finds the other dead girl, who was the meanest one,
Yeah.
right? So like the film went, there's no redemption arc for
Yeah.
the mean one. She's gone.
She's dead.
She's dead. It's fine. The other two are a bit more ambiguous, but they're still
Awful
awful,
people. Yeah.
awful people. And so yeah, and then the man comes back, and you're like, oh, what's going to happen? One of my favorite moments, as the man has kind of rescued Sara, as it were, from her tower. If she was like the princess, and she's like, struck her evil mother, and she's taken her in the van, and he's almost ran over those nasty boys from before. They crash into the bull, which is like this weird side story that's happening in the background.
Yeah.
There's been a bull run, and the bull's gone missing, and not gone missing, got out, and the police are trying to track it. But anyway, the van runs into the bull, they crash, and he carries her into the slaughterhouse, as we've discovered. It's very romantic. It's very it's very an officer and a gentleman.
Yeah.
And again, I was like, when I was younger, oh my God, I would love to have been picked up like a princess.
Right. Yeah.
And I was like, and here he is carrying Sara like the princess she is to me anyway. Princess of my heart, Sara. People's princess. And he like tends to her wounds.
Yeah.
So we really see this like caring, like it's abundantly clear, like he really cares for Sara. And so when she's running away, I was a bit like, oh, why are you running away? I think you're cool. I think you might be cool here. And cool like this. Like, I mean, how cool can you be in the slaughterhouse with this murdering man? But you know what I mean? Like she is not his target.
Yeah.
And then when he finally gets her, he gives her the knife to stab Rossi. And I was like, here's your moral moment, your morality moment. So I was like, yeah, I think I'd have understood. I'd have understood, right?
Yeah.
And she takes that as her chance to like stab them or like at least attack him, and he
Mhm.
overpowers her. He's a very big man, right? He's very tall. He's obviously older than her
Mhm.
by quite some way, actually. Probably, we're talking about abusive relationships. A lot of grooming is going on in
Yeah.
this film. And yeah, and he's also got like a big belly on him. But easily overpowers Sara, and they have this fight.
Mhm.
And she is like growling. It's like this real guttural, like almost like psyching herself up. And I thought she sounds like a wild animal. She
Yeah.
sounds like a boar, like
Yeah.
a pig. Like she has been told her, obviously, like her entire life in this entire film, we've heard her be called Piggy, Piggy, Piggy. And here she is emulating this pig, and she attacks him and she bites his jugular, rips out
Yeah.
his neck. And I was like, oh, and it's her mouth. It's her mouth, this thing that has been, quote unquote, the thing that has held her back
Yeah.
or has caused all this ridicule. She had, and I'm saying things I don't believe, but in the film they
Yeah.
believe. If she'd kept her mouth shut, then she wouldn't be Piggy, right?
Yeah.
But now she's using this mouth to defend herself, to kind of like fight back. And you said at the end, she walks out and like she walks to her freedom. She
Mm.
walks with such like almost like resolution.
Yeah.
And but then as she's killed the man and he's bled out, and the gun goes off during the scuffle,
Yeah.
and Klaus' hand.
Bow's arm. Yeah.
Oh my god, so good. I was like, yes. I was like, that's my catharsis. I was like,
Yeah.
yes, Klaus. And the bracelet falls. I was like, oh, so dramatic. I loved it. It looked good. It looked
Yeah.
real good gore there. Yeah. So then she kills the man and she starts crying.
Yeah.
I was very close to tears because for me it's not just that she's crying out of sadness. It's this is the first person, remove gender, first person that showed her kindness and defended her. And
Yeah.
she has killed him.
Yeah.
And then you've got Rossi in the back calling her Piggy for the billionth time this film.
I know, right? You're like, read the room.
I literally gasped in the cinema when I heard it. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, and then she shoots her, and I was like, no, completely fair. Completely fair.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get saved and then call your savior the thing you've been bullying her for however many years it's been. But then we find out, no, she didn't. She just shot her down off the
Yeah.
hook. And everything's cool. Same with Klaus. She shoots her down off the hook and she walks off. And she's covered in blood. Covered in it. And she looks cool.
It's definitely that final girl moment, isn't it?
It
That
is
like,
her. Yes.
yeah, that we're so used to seeing from slashers that, the
Yeah.
final girl walks out and she's reborn in a bath of blood. And
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like her baptism that she's
Mm-hmm.
emerging from this body of blood
Mm-hmm.
and is now a changed woman.
Mm-hmm.
And that is definitely Sara's moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She did the right thing from a place of legality, I guess. And I guess
I think,
morally.
you know what? I think that if she thought she could get away with it, she definitely would have been like, you know what? If there wasn't like a big gang of police and, all these like
Mm.
whalers kind of in the village after her, I definitely think she would have been like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's go.
Yeah. Like I think, how could you not?
Yeah.
And I think any other film would have let that happen. I do
Yeah.
because, but I think that that's why I'm like really struggling with the catharsis at the end because I'm like, oh, they.
But then again, would you have wanted to see her become that
I don't
like
know.
monstrous fat femme? Because
Oh
like,
yeah, good
so
point.
I've been rewatching Criminal Minds recently, and
Ooh, okay.
it's my favorite TV show.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm noticing that like 90% of the female criminals, the female murderers, are fat women. Like of when they're women, they're fat. And
Oh,
so
what?
yeah, and I didn't notice before, but I'm watching it back now, and the killers who are women, like in the show, 90% of them are fat. And it's just like creating that monstrous fat woman.
Mm,
And I think it would have been, even though we can see how easy it would have been, and we would not have blamed Sara for doing so. I
mm.
think if they'd gone down that route, we would have seen another monstrous fat woman that is not conducive to an anti-fat phobic film.
Oh, you're so right. You're so right. My passion for revenge has blinded me
I don't
against
blame you. I don't blame you.
against the fight that I'm literally doing with this
Yeah.
podcast. No, I just think you're totally right. And I think that is so interesting because if you compare Sara to the girls, right? She is I thought it was really interesting. We get two scenes that parallel each other, right? We get the Clow is seeing Pedro and the guy with the moped, and there's a shot where she's like on the back of his moped and her hair is in the wind and she's blonde. She's got like thin blonde hair. I mean like thin as in like volume. It's like a
Mm,
little blonde bob compared to Sarah's very dense, dark, curly hair. And
yeah.
again, as someone who has very natural hair just like that, I was like, I mean, is this film about me? Excuse me. And so like Clow is the stereotypical beauty standard. You know, she's
Mm,
this cute blonde, thin girl. So we see her have that scene. And at the very end, when Sara has walked out covered in blood, like you say, she had her baptism of fire. She has become reborn into this young woman who maybe, I hope, is a lot more sure of herself.
mm,
And Pedro stops, and there's again a little bit of a a C plot going on when he comes from like an abusive household, and he stops and he's obviously like trying to run away from home. He's got like a bag and he's got a
mm.
black eye, and he stops and he's like, "Sorry, are you okay?" And she just says, "Help." And
Yeah.
he goes, "Yeah, yeah, we'll take you into the village. Get on." And so she gets on the back of his bike, and she, as he's like driving in the Spanish countryside, she like puts her arms out. She just feels the breeze like
Mm.
rush over her. And again, I was like, yes, Sara, get your fucking cool girl on the back of some cute boy's motorbike moment. You deserve it. I fully support this moment. I just think that was really telling. That was the film going, okay, Cloud got it. Sara's getting it too. Sara's
Yeah.
just as quote unquote worthy
Yeah.
to have that. I'm not saying it's romantic, but it's cool. It's
Yeah.
cool, right? And fat girls can't be cool, but Sarah's cool in this moment. And I think go back to what you were saying about the fat femme villain. Like I totally hear you because more often than not, because I can't, my brain just went straight to Kathy Bates and Misery when you said
Yeah. Yeah.
right, and I'm like, mm, the fact that they really, again, I really apologize if this is not great word to use, but like the uglier up,
Yeah.
they purposely don't put any makeup on her. They give her really drab hair. They give her a really drab dress and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, we get it. She's not meant to be like someone that James Caan finds hot. Okay, like I get it. I think like that they do that to a certain extent with Sara. She
Mm.
there's I guess you can make an argument that she might not have access to any of the like cool girl clothes because of her
Yeah.
size, or she might not have access to like a cool hairdressers maybe because of money. Because again, it's not explicitly said, but it's implied that her family aren't doing the best financially. So then
Yeah.
you're going, okay, well she doesn't have as much privilege as the
Mm.
other girls to like make herself look cool. But yeah, it really plays into the idea of like again, I'm sorry if this is like the wrong word to use, but like plain, like
Yeah.
plain fat girl, not a lot
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
And there's that moment where she's talking to Pedro about what happened, and she calls him out about the bullying, going like you participate, you might be
Yeah.
passive, but you participate. And they're getting high, and she's the first time we hear her laugh,
Yeah.
And she's like, I get it's high laughs, but it's laughing.
Mm.
And they're both laughing together, and these boys walk by and they go, Hola Pedro, and he just goes stony because he
Yeah.
realizes he's been seen with her.
Yeah.
And you're like, fuck's sake, Pedro, just she's a human being,
Yeah.
You're allowed to socialize with her. She's just seen as such a pariah.
Mm.
And I just hope, like, I always think with these films, I did a piece for Ghouls magazine on the blood-soaked woman, and I mentioned Ready or Not, The Descent, and Carrie.
Mm.
And all three of those women get covered in blood at some point, and it really is to signify becoming who they are. But I,
Mm-hmm.
but I find at the end of those films, they could be in a lot of trouble, right? Especially, I think, with Ready or Not, like, the police are never going to
Yeah.
believe that, that a
Yeah.
curse just killed her whole family. And I wonder, like, when she gets back to the village, does Sara get away with it? Like, not that she needs to get away with it, but do you think any blame could potentially fall to her?
Possibly, but I don't think so. Well, I'd
Mm-hmm.
like to think no, but then
Mm-hmm.
again, they live in a fat phobic victim blaming society, so
Exactly.
probably. But I'd hope not. I'd
Mm-hmm.
hope they'd kind of see her as the heroic, she found those girls,
Mm-hmm.
she killed the guy and set them free.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, she didn't hang around for the police, but like maybe they didn't have any mobile phones, so she had to go off and,
Yeah,
you know,
definitely. I think her leaving is the right thing to do, like even like tactically, like
yeah,
strategically, because the police weren't to onto him. They like
yeah,
this random man who just seems to be floating around their village. Um, so yeah, she did need to go get help, and she obviously was getting help by going to the village. I guess, do Clow and Rossi learn their lesson?
you'd hope so. I mean,
Mm.
what with, a dismembered arm and a lifetime of trauma counseling, you'd hope so. But I think with Ross's reaction to Sara
Yeah.
helping her, there's very little possibility of redemption, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think that's my thing. I was like, could they go back and be like, well, she knew the whole time, you
Yeah,
know? Or I don't know. Rossi could say, I can imagine Rossi going back there like, oh, she reacted really weirdly when she finally killed the murderer. I just worry. Like, I mean, I know it's just a film and they're not real people, and I don't have to worry that much. But I was just like struck with, okay, but how does this actually end? Like, is
yeah,
Sarah okay? She's okay now as the film ends, but like, I don't know. I guess the whole point, or what I no, not the whole point. What I took away from that bit where Rossi goes, what the hell, Piggy, or something like that. I'm like, oh, you know what? Fat people can move the world, and it will
yeah.
never be enough for some people.
Hmm.
We have some incredibly talented, intelligent, fit, athletic, enter, positive characteristic here for, fat people, because, we're multifaceted human beings, and they still get shit on them just because they're fat.
Yeah,
And that for me was that moment. I was like, oh yeah, you could do everything right, but because your body doesn't fit, quote unquote, you're still going to get ridiculed for it. And she still calls her Piggy, and I'm like, fuck's sake, Rossi, like, you've not learned anything. And I just wonder whether, like, whether they get it.
no, I don't think they
No.
do.
Okay. Right. Okay, I've kind of come to the end of my notes. Did you have anything else you wanted to raise about Piggy?
No, I think we've covered, we've pretty much exhaustive
Yes.
expanse of this. No, I think we've covered everything I wanted to say about it. So,
Perfect. Well, that's good because that works out really well. And so, what we do at the end of each episode is we rate our films or TV based on how well we think they represent fat bodies or body diversity as a whole. And we rate it out of ourselves. So,
right.
out of 5 Ygraines, what would you rate Piggy?
I would rate Piggy, I'd rate 4
Mhm.
Ygraines and an upper torso.
Okay, I love that. We've not had that before. Dismembered rating.
Of course, with it
Of
being
course.
me. There has to be a certain type of dismemberment in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand on why 4.5?
I think it's pretty much perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I do, I think it's a perfect embodiment of how fat bodies exist within the world.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish that I don't know, half of me is like, the lower half of me is like,
That's so good.
I'm glad that they didn't expand too much on the guy, but at the same time, I think bringing in a male perspective of
Mm-hmm.
being in a fat body would have been interesting as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me being like, I
Yes.
don't like ambiguity all that much. I want things explained.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm only given half a torso for the end, because I just wish there was a tiny little bit more explanation. Not too much, but
Yeah.
just a tiny little bit more.
Yeah, totally. I view him as what Sarah could become,
Yeah.
which is clearly this very angry at the world. Because I'm sure, again, like you say, that we don't actually know, but I'm sure he's experienced a lot of fat phobia himself. And and that's why I think, he hears what's happening to Sarah and feels he has to take action to defend her because he wants to protect her from this fat phobic world. But we don't know. We have to make those assumptions based on who he is
Mm.
and based on his actions. And because actually when we first meet him, he kills the lifeguard and the waitress and they weren't fat
Mm.
phobic to him, so he just killed them for fun. So
Yeah.
actually I could be talking shit. Who knows? We don't know. But I think I'm going to give it 5 Hannahs. I absolutely just adore this film. It really speaks to me. I am emotionally drained by it in the best
Mm.
possible way, in the best possible way. And I think it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, going back, touching on the Fright Fest controversy, drama, tea, I don't know what you want to call it, but the question that was asked, and also my own experience of being in the cinema. So I was sat next to a couple and, didn't hear a peep of them at all
Mm-hmm.
until the scene where he carries Sarah into the slaughterhouse and they laughed.
Mm.
I really was like struck by that because I was like, oh, why do you find that funny?
Yeah.
Because, like, unfortunately, like, I think it's because you think the whole notion
Yeah.
of this bigger girl being carried in a romantic, and I keep saying princess style, and I hope
Yeah.
that makes sense. Princess style way, like you find that funny because it's like
Mm.
almost like unbelievable to you.
Yeah.
And I think like you need to look inside yourself and wonder whether that's appropriate
Mm.
because it's not. I'll tell you it's not, but I mean, who am I to tell you? Like, you need to work that one out yourself. So yeah, I think from a point of view of like it raised a lot of interesting nuances about being fat, especially being a young fat girl
Yeah.
in a small village where fat phobia is rampant. I think yeah, it's great. It's a 5 out of 5 Hannahs. I love it. Just a cheeky little plug from me. I wrote an article on this film for Ghouls magazine. It's called From One Fat Girl to Another. Thank you, Piggy. To be fair, it talks a lot about what we've already spoken
Mm-hmm.
about, but it's in the format of the written word. So I'll put a link in that in the show notes. So thank you so much, Ygraine, for like coming on and talking about all things Piggy. Is there anything you would like to plug, or where can the lovely listeners find more of your work?
Well, you can listen to my podcast, which is What a Scream, which is a horror movie podcast, where we talk about a random topic and discuss two films that kind of have to do with that topic. So recently I did an episode with Zoe, editor of Ghouls, and we talked about cannibalism and what the best way to cook a human foot is, because that's how weird we got. Um,
Nice.
I know, right? And then you can find me on Twitter at what_scream or on Instagram at what a scream. And there you'll be able to find my writings for moving pictures or ghouls. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Ygraine. And the lovely listeners can find the podcast at Fats on Film on Twitter and Instagram, and myself at Queen Bee Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode, and stay fat.